that young friend did help me realize that sometimes I make the tea and I'm too busy to even enjoy it. So about 7 years ago, when I was serving a congregation in Indianapolis, I was at a board meeting of the Center for Interfaith Cooperation. And we were having a special board meeting, one that wasn't scheduled, because we were considering something important and new to us. The center board had agreed long ago that we wouldn't take a public stand as an organization unless we had 100% consensus on our board on something. And so we often spoke up against religious violence. So when there was a religious targeting of a house of faith, we joined together to talk about the importance of pluralism and tolerance. And yet, we would recognize, many of us, that there was another kind of violence happening in our city and our state. Hate crimes against people for their identities, which could include religious identities, but include other parts of who they were. And some of us, myself included, said, how can we not take a stand against violent hate? Violent hate is the opposite of everything we come together to discuss and how we connect to one another across our differences of belief. And the holdup was Indiana was one of 6 states that did not have a state hate crimes bill. And the holdup was it wanted to explicitly include targeting individuals for their gender or their non-gender conforming identity would be a protected class. And there were those amongst us, their traditions did not extend that far. And as we debated this issue and talked and listened, it was more of a listening and a invitation and challenging people to really consider how they wanted their faith and our organization to be. One of them said, here's what it comes down to. Everyone here, all faiths can be boiled down to we all believe the golden rule. Do unto others as you would like done unto. And I was like, I'm not really sure that's my faith. And there was this progressive Muslim woman across who was like, And so I shared, I'm actually not sure that that's what my faith as a Unitarian Universalism boils down to. And she goes, then what does it boil down to? And I said, the platinum rule. See, I'd been talking to my daughter, Sadie, about these rules, seemingly metallurgical rules. And I said, it really started thousands of years ago with the bronze rule. This is my language. The bronze rule is Hammurabi's code. And Hammurabi's code says an eye for an eye, which meant at that time if you blinded someone, then you would be blinded. If you disabled someone because you ran over them with your ox cart, you would be disabled too, punished with disability. And I said, this sounds really barbaric. My daughter was like, I don't like these rules at all. And yet I said it was an important rule at the time, because it was the first time that any government that we know of said, if any person does harm to another, regardless if they were the king or they slept on the street or what money or resources they had, they would face the same punishment. And the punishment was also meant to say it wouldn't extend, the punishment wouldn't go beyond the harm you caused. It was trying to strike fairness and equality about who gets punished and equality of the punishment across their land. I said, that's good, but can we improve it, Sadie? And she said, yes. So I said, so then there's the silver rule. The silver rule is, and we hear this a lot, treat everyone the same, right? It means when you go to a classroom and you treat everyone the same, everyone gets an apple juice box, right? Apple juice is pretty good. We like apple juice, except it's not that great for someone who's diabetic or for someone who's allergic to apples like my husband. What are they going to do if the only option is apple juice? And in a larger sense, I think of this as like the universal minimum wage or minimum income, which I support. But let's be honest, even $1,000 a month, which is not a bad place to begin, does not help someone with persistent, chronic financial needs. And nor does Mark Zuckerberg need an extra $1,000 a month. So the silver rule doesn't quite get to what we need either. Then there's the golden rule. The golden rule is pretty good. Do unto others as you would like to be done unto. It thinks, how would I like to be treated? How would I like to be welcomed? What do I need to make sure that I have the opportunity to flourish? But it doesn't quite fit because people are different. So I think a great example of this that helped me understand sometimes where the golden rule doesn't quite work is around hospitality and welcoming. I learned this, as many people do, by my experiences through my in-laws. So for instance, in my family, when we come and see each other, we don't even always like each other that much, but when we come and see each other, we rush in, we hug, and we basically sit down and talk for about 7 hours. At which point you say, do you want to walk with me to go get food and bring it back? But when I would go and visit my in-laws, they'd say, welcome, welcome so much. I'm sure you'll want to go upstairs and settle down, and we'll see you for dinner. And I was like, do they not want to talk to me? Where are we going? Like, what are we supposed to do? What am I supposed to do now? And I learned when they're greeted, they actually do want to get settled. They want to go and unpack a little, get themselves to live, splash some water, have a drink of water, and then they want to come sit and talk. The way we greet each other, welcome each other, do we want a hug? Do we want a handshake? Do we just want to be greeted by a warm smile, right? All of that doesn't quite fit into a standard treat people as you want to be treated because it might be different, which is something we talked last week about in our radical inclusion training. And so then it comes to the platinum rule. Do unto others as they would like to be done unto. And why do I think this is the kind of rule that encaptures Unitarian Universalism today? It's because of William Ellery Channing and his Universalist theology. Now, if you've been paying attention at some point, you might say, wait, Reverend Anastassia, isn't William Ellery Channing the founding father of American Unitarianism, not Universalism? But Channing did serve one of the most prominent Unitarian churches in Boston, and he was also Universalist in theology. He was an original Unitarian Universalist. And it was his universalism that really speaks to me in the Platinum Rule. Now you might think, what is universalism? Universalism in the most basic sense is God is so loving that every single person will join God in heaven. Universal salvation. Universal. Wait, isn't that a little bit like the silver rule? Like we all get apple juice, we all get heaven? Or a little bit like the golden rule, like, oh, I would like heaven, so you'll like heaven, and like we'll all go there? And it's true, right? There's a little bit of that. But I want to say, boy, were they bold and broad in that universalism in such powerful ways. So let's think about American society when so many Christian preachers were using the Bible to justify slavery or to preach only salvation for a few. They said, no, salvation is for every single one of us. And as in 1790, at a Universalist convention, they passed a resolution, a doctrine, standing up to slavery. believing that everyone belonged and was worthy. William Ellery Channing was a Universalist like that. In 1835, he published Slavery, a book on slavery. And in it, and I want to say 1835, this was a time when it was not yet popular, even in Boston, even in the North, for people to really be abolitionists or outspoken against slavery and in the anti-slavery position. And yet he published, despite pushback from his congregation. And in this, he talked about how every person, including those human beings who were enslaved, had the capacity for rational capacity and the spark of conscience. Now, rational capacity and the spark of conscience, what that means is, rational capacity is our gift to reason and think and to puzzle, to solve. And for Channing, it was the paramount of human capacity to contribute, to achieve, to do. It was agency given to us by God. And the conscience was the voice of our soul. Channing articulated that we were sacred and good because we had the spark of the divine within us, the capacity to reason and the soul and conscience. And Channing specifically said, every person, enslaved and enslaver, has these gifts from God. In fact, God, he gave words to God that said, all souls are mine. This radical message suggested that no human being could ever own another because we all belong to God. A kind of spiritual liberation to prelude legal liberation. All souls are mine. Everyone is a child of God. And this, I think, is kind of the theology at the heart of this spiritual hymn. If anybody asks you who I am, who I am, who I am, if anybody asks you who I am, tell them I'm a child of God. If anybody asks you who you are, who you are, who you are, if anybody asks you who you are, tell them you're a child of God. And every child of God should be free. All souls are mine, which was also Channing's way of reminding people everyone would be united with God in heaven and reconciled with each other. Imagine a love so powerful, it would prompt forgiveness from those who had been forcefully enslaved. Imagine a love so powerful, it would cause an inner transformation, a humility, a recognition, and accountability amongst those who had been violent oppressors and dehumanizers, to know themselves as a worthy child of God, and to know every person as one too. Now you might say, and I hope you don't, I can't imagine a love that powerful. I don't know a love in this world that powerful. But I actually hope it inspires you to imagine a prophetic love like that, because I will tell you, we need imagination and love to think about how we could have more justice, more equity, more forgiveness, more compassion, more sharing, more mutuality, more love in this world. That was part of Channing's Universalism, but it's actually not fully the part of the Platinum Rule. See, one night, I think Channing was preparing his Sunday sermon, and he was like, oh my God. And he got really bothered. He couldn't sleep that night. He was really worried that he had failed in something. And he said, I am worried that I have been so emphatic about this God's love for everyone, about this worthiness of everyone, that maybe I've forgotten to say that God loves you particularly, and you particularly, and me particularly, because God doesn't just look at us as children. He knows us, each one, as a child of this universe. In short, he actually said, to God, we are all a person of interest. To God, we're all a person of interest, which means God is interested in us. God is interested in who we are, and what our struggles are, and where we're feeling a yearning and a compassion and want to do and become, a yearning to know how we want to flourish and a yearning to know the fullness of our human dignity. Now, Channing and the other Universalists said, Universalism that God practices is a model for us. So if we're all going to end up reconciled someday in heaven, maybe we could start by practicing more equity here amongst us. And by the way, if we're a person of interest to God, we should be interested in each other. Which I mean, be interested in each other. Be interested in the people you have encounters with. Be interested in the person on that coffee or tea line before you or after you. Get to know them a little. Be interested in the person you passed by 10 times and haven't even nodded to. Now, the New York Times said probably the best way to be interested is to do just a couple things. One, ask a few good questions. A generous question goes a long way. And second, give time for be spaciously patient to let the answer come. Listen with spaciousness. A few months ago, we had the memorial service for Karen Muir. And one reason Karen was so deeply loved is because she was a person who was interested in other people. And so people blossomed in front of her. My dear ones, be interested. Take time to know and be known by one another, because I don't know that there is a greater blessing in your life or the better pathway to practicing equity through the Platinum Rule. May we do this in small ways and big ways to come. May it be so, and amen.